It's still the early days, but who are potentially the top 10 draft day steals from the 2025 draft class highlighted by Matthew Schaefer and Ben Kindel?
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this show, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I'm your host, Sebastian High, the USA scout over at Elite Prospects. And on today's episode, we're going to look at the most recent draft to complete this little mini-series that we've gotten going on the podcast, looking at all the draft class since I started doing this work in scouting since 2020, looking at some of the gems from each single draft, and did a couple episodes with head-to-heads between like Emmett Finney and Zach Benson for the steal of the draft of the 2023 class. And for this one, we're going to have a little bit of a different angle that we're going to take to look at some of these gems. We're going to look at some of the high-end picks first in the segment. Then we're going to move on to looking at 3 players with elite level handling with big upside and some risk. And finally, we're going to look at 3 depth gems from my neck of the woods that I scouted closely that have gotten off to very good starts in their D+1 campaigns from the USHL last year. We've got LJ Mooney, who's now playing in the NCAA, as well as a pair of now OHL and QMJHL, so CHL players that switched from the USHL. So we've got a lot on the agenda here today. And of course, we will be giving a big shout out to the biggest steal of draft class who went first overall. But before we jump into the entire show here, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app right now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. So let's kick things off, because there's nowhere to start an episode like this of the biggest draft gems or the biggest draft steals apart from the number 1 draft pick, who has already been a home run swing, has 7 points in the first 8 games. And of course, I am talking about Matthew Schaefer of the New York Islanders, who has just gotten off to the most flying start that you could possibly hope for to begin an NHL career. He's less than 10 games into his NHL stardom, and he's already played 4 games over 25 minutes a night. He's easily the most utilized player on the New York Islanders. He's been their best player on many nights, and on his off nights, he's still one of their better producers and contributors. He can do a bit of everything. Mobility is elite. The vision and IQ are elite. The playmaking upside is there. The defensive stability and ability to just like pin opponents to the boards and angle rushers towards the outside, protecting the middle lane. He's like an NHL vet in so many ways already. The maturity is fantastic. But we've already talked about Matthew Schaefer a lot. I'm going to link up in the corner, up above, a full-length episode that we spent just diving into his game and why he is a future Norris candidate, and just how impressive the beginning of the season has been for Matthew Schaefer. But let's just move on immediately to the next guy on the board, because Benjamin Kindel is probably the player I'll be having on the thumbnail for this episode if you're watching it on YouTube, because he's been my biggest surprise so far in the draft class. A player that I was not expecting to crack the NHL out of the gate. I was not expecting to be a top 15 pick in this year's draft, let alone at 11th overall. And the Pittsburgh Penguins took a big swing on him, and he's been showing them that, he belongs in the NHL. He scored a very pretty goal against the Florida Panthers off a give and go in the offensive zone, and a one-timer that beat Bobrovsky up high. Really impressive performances that he's been able to string together. And he's an undersized player at 5'11", 181 pounds as a right shot right winger, but the intelligence with which he plays has always been his biggest strength, going back to last season with the Calgary Hitmen, where he put up, of course, 99 points in 65 games. And this year, he's up to 2 goals in 7 games with the Pittsburgh Penguins, playing mostly third-line minutes so far this campaign. But He's a player that has some really impressive chops as a playmaker, as a puck handler. The shot has really improved as well over the course of the past 2 seasons. And I mean, that shot that beat Zharovsky was beyond just an NHL caliber release. That was a howitzer of a one-timer. So definitely a player, I think, that has impressed me massively. And the Pittsburgh Penguins have been very much showing why they selected this player this high up the draft. They value him incredibly highly. They're giving him a shot in the National Hockey League right out of the gate, rather than sending him back down to the WHL. And he's been making an argument to stay beyond a 9-game trial. We'll see if that ends up sticking this season or not. I don't think there's a wrong decision to make here, but I think that the Penguins are certainly trending towards keeping him in the lineup from kind of what I'm seeing on the ice here so far this campaign. So Benjamin Kindel, very impressive beginning to his NHL drafted career in the National Hockey League. One of the few players playing in the NHL so far from that draft class, alongside guys like Matthew Schaefer and Michael Misa, who went top 2. Ben Kindel really making his mark here outside the top 10 as a value selection on elite level smarts, great playmaking, and standout puck handling. So very impressive play so far from Ben Kindel. Moving on, we've got a player that I have unabashedly been a very big fan of for the past year, and that's Václav Nestrašil, who fell to the Chicago Blackhawks at 25th overall. Big Czech right wing, 6'6", 190 pounds as a right shot winger. And I'm also going to link this up above. Again, we had an interview with Václav in the offseason. That was a 45-minute chat that I thought went wonderfully. We had a really nice conversation and really delved into the beginnings he had as a hockey player, as well as how this past season went and what his expectations were for his NCAA freshman campaign here this season. And boy, oh boy, has it gotten off to a hot start. 7 games so far with UMass, and he's up to 6 goals and 9 points. He's joint top in goal scoring on his team. He's joint for 6th in goals across the entire NCAA, and just overall has been a minute-munching phenomenon, basically, so far in his career. And UMass has gotten off to a hot start. They're 5-2 so far this campaign, and he's been a very important part of those results. Had a hat-trick performance against Stonehill College, another 3-point night against Bentley, 2-point night against Nebraska Omaha. The quality of competition hasn't been the highest in the world just yet that they've faced, but he has been productive at every single turn, and he's got a great shot. He gets to the net front. He loves playing on the PK. He told me in the offseason in our interview he prefers PK to power play, one of the few skilled forwards that prefers that, and he is a very skilled forward. He's attempted Michigan's. He scored a Michigan last season as well in the USHL with Muskegon Lumberjacks, and played a very big role in them winning the Clark Cup championship, winning the USHL title last season. Just very skilled as a puck handler, intelligent, pacey, intense, physically involved, especially here in the past year. This guy is a power forward in the making, and I think he's got top 6 upside for the Chicago Blackhawks, and he's certainly showing that talent so far in the NCAA again with 9 points and 6 goals in 7 games. That is ludicrous stuff. But finally, to wrap up the show here, we've got a player who was drafted by the Ottawa Senators just 2 picks earlier at 23rd overall, and that is Logan Hensler, the 6'3", 198-pound right shot defenseman from the University of Wisconsin. Very mobile defenseman. I think he's a great fit in the Ottawa system. He plays physically engaged, a very intelligent defender in how he's able to angle players towards the boards. Definitely still has some decision-making qualms here and there, but he really discovered his offensive activations way more at the back half of last year, showing big offensive upside, also just driving play from the blue line. Really nice activation game in the offensive zone, and nice shot from the blue line, decent playmaking skill. He's got a bit of everything, but everything just flows through his feet. And he plays a safe game. Just a very projectable player. I think he's going to be an NHLer, probably a second pairing guy, maybe a third pairing guy if the tools don't quite carry over and the skill doesn't translate. But he's got all the tools in the world to be a top 4 piece in Ottawa, and I think he's a real competitor with Carter Yakimchuk for that future top pairing role down the right side. I think he's the stable option, the less exciting option between the two, but he's got all the tools in the book that you could possibly desire from a right shot defenseman. But that wraps up this first segment. In the next one, we'll be talking about a trio of elite puck handlers in Alex Zharovsky of the Montreal Canadiens, has been off to a flying start in the KHL alongside Ryker Lee and Cooper Simpson. But first, we got a quick message here from our sponsors at Locked On NHL Prospects. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer that you do not want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the entire app. What I love about FanDuel is that it gives me so many different ways to play. I've built parlays, tried player props, and even followed the live lines during the games as the action is unfolding right in front of me from the living room couch. But I've got to say my favorite has to be the parlays because it allows me to combine predictions from multiple different games and take big swings and combining predictions to maximize my potential returns. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today to get started. All right, let's keep this episode rolling as we're going to be switching gears here to guys that were picked in the late first, early second, and even a guy picked in the third who have elite level handling ability and have been flashing it here early on in the new season. And we've got to kick things off with the Montreal Canadiens prospect, the player that they traded way up for in the second round at 34th overall, Alexander Zharovsky. And as a reminder, the Habs, in terms of just pure draft pick value, overpaid to make sure that they got this guy. He was their guy after trading 2 picks for Noah Dobson in the first round. This was the player that they needed, that they wanted, that has top 6 upside that they see. And they traded picks 42 and 49 to the Carolina Hurricanes to move up to 34th overall. So a mid-second round pick just to move up 8 slots in the second round, that's an overpay on paper. But Alex Zharovsky has been showing exactly why the Habs have made that trade on draft day. And so far this season, playing in the KHL against men with UFA, he's played 11 games so far, scored 4 goals and 9 points. Almost a point a game production in the KHL while averaging right around 13 to 14 minutes a night so far this season. That is ridiculous stuff in terms of per 60 production. And overall, this guy's got like massive amounts of handling skill. Like the amount of just deft handling ability he has is fantastic. He was, I think, individually the most skilled puck handler in the entire 2025 draft class, and the Habs got him outside the first round, but he has a lot more than just that. He's got a good shot from in tight. He's able to really evade opponents with his skating, not elite in terms of gaining separation in terms of pure speed, but that evasiveness, that lateral mobility is an area of strength, and has a significant amount of playmaking ability as well. So he's been earning more and more minutes here as the year's gone on with UFA, going from a 4-minute night just a couple weeks ago on the 15th of October, where he did end up scoring the game-winning goal and getting an extra assist. So 2 points in 4 minutes is nothing to scoff at. But since then, his minutes have just been climbing up to 13, 15, 15 again, and now 17 in his most recent game, where he scored a goal in a 2-1 victory over Nizhnekamsk. And overall, Zharovsky is just a guy that I think is electrifying. And the Habs did great business getting him in the second round. And I think he does have that top 6 upside. Not first line upside, especially on a team like Montreal that already has pieces like Slavkovsky and Caulfield and Suzuki and Demidov, but as a second line elite handler, power play option who can move up the lineup in case of injuries, this guy is a fantastic swing to take. And I think as a potential future partner for a playmaker like Michael Hage, who moves so well, has so much speed off the rush, the added elite handling of Zharovsky can make that second line so dynamic down the future. So overall, great pick by the Habs. And we move on to one of my favorite players from last year's draft class, and that's Ryker Lee, who's currently playing with Michigan State University, played with Madison Capitals last season, and earned himself a first-round selection at 26th overall by the Nashville Predators. And he's a 6'1", 185-pound right shot winger. And so far this season, he's got a goal and 3 points in 6 games with Michigan State, and it's been a hot start for that team so far this season. They're 5-1, won both of their games against the highly touted Boston University Terriers, and I think that Ryker Lee has a role to play with that hot start, especially in that second game against BU. He had a goal and an assist in that overtime victory. So Ryker Lee is definitely a guy that with elite level hands, great creativity, a really heavy shot, and massive amounts of playmaking skill, has every single tool in the book in terms of just the puck skills to be a creative NHL piece down the line. But the question is, can his skating take the steps to support that game at the next level? He was one of the worst skaters in terms of the mechanics, the fluidity, the speed that we scouted at elite prospects among high-end draft eligibles last season. So definitely has some areas to improve, but this guy by the end of last campaign, and what we've seen so far in college hockey as well, he's able to be physical on the forecheck, really is getting involved and a better two-way piece than he was at the start of last season, and has all of these high-end tools to boot. So very exciting player, Ryker Lee, definitely a gem of a draft selection by the Nashville Predators in the late first round, a guy I had ranked in a similar range, but I think has a real significant amount of top 6 upside down the stretch. But we move on to a player that I had ranked a lot higher than consensus, who fell to the early third round to the Boston Bruins, and that is Cooper Simpson, currently playing with the Youngstown Phantoms. He split last season between Shakopee High in the Minnesota high school circuit and the Tri-City Storm in the USHL, and he scored 7 goals and 8 points in 9 games with Tri-City, and this season's gotten off to a fantastic start with Youngstown scoring 5 goals and 15 points in 13 games, and has had a bit of a dry spell here the last 3 games, going pointless against Green Bay and Sioux City twice, but still, he's a player with just a tremendous amount of dexterous talent and skill. I'm going to read to you a scouting report that I wrote about him in a game against the Muskegon Lumberjacks from October 3rd. Regularly the most dexterous player on the ice, Cooper Simpson flaunted his talent to beat opponents one-on-one in open ice this game. Early in the second period, he exited the zone by flipping the puck over his checker's stick and cutting back against his momentum before picking up the puck and driving the middle lane at pace. He linked plays well between his wingers and showed off his skill set with more passing lanes from the center ice position. There's more haste to Simpson's games and puck touches so far this season, even on the power play, avoiding wasting time and forcing individual efforts. He kept the puck moving and balanced system buy-in with dynamic creativity. He looked to leverage his skating to evade rather than burn, conserving his energy for explosive bursts when they were most needed. His ability to spin off checks will need to continue improving, as Simpson can be boxed out on the perimeter by big, strong, well-positioned defenders. He has the talent to fight for MVP consideration this campaign, but the defensive habits and physical details will have to take a step. Still, an exciting start to the season for the most underrated high-skill Bruins prospect. And I think he was a slam dunk selection for Boston there at 79th overall this past draft, a guy that I had ranked as a very clear early second-round candidate based on pure skill and playmaking upside and skating ability and handling skill. There's so much to like with this player, and overall, I think he's a guy that could maybe someday push to be a second-line piece in Boston. I think anywhere in that middle 6 is kind of where his upside falls at the end of the day, and to get that in the third round is certainly great value, and he's showing here early on the season that he certainly was not a bad risk to take by the Boston Bruins. I mean, among USHL highest producers so far this season, his 15 points are joint first in the league alongside Brent Solomon, Detroit Red Wings prospect, and Ryan Rusinski of the Buffalo Sabres. So he's really there at the top of the league in terms of offensive threat so far this season, and I'm very excited to see how he, alongside both Zharovsky and Lee, continue to take steps in the right direction here this campaign. But that wraps things up here for our second segment in today's episode. We'll wrap things up in the final segment, breaking down the games and progressions of LJ Mooney of the Montreal Canadiens, Everett Baldwin of the Tampa Bay Lightning, and Edison Engle of the Winnipeg Jets. All right, let's wrap up the show here in the final segment, breaking down 3 of my favorite gem picks from the USHL last season who are no longer playing in the USHL and are plying their trade in pacier leagues at this stage. And we'll kick things off with a Montreal Canadiens 4th-round pick who went 113th overall, and that's Little John L.J. Mooney, playing with the University of Minnesota here this season. He's an undersized dynamo, 5'7", 157 pounds, the right shot winger. He can play at center at times as well, but is likely a winger projection at the next level. And LJ is a player with incessant pace, really high motor. He's a really speedy, high-end skater with great handling skill and playmaking flashes when he's at his best. And so far with the University of Minnesota, who've gotten off to a really struggling start here this campaign, he still has been able to score 4 points, including 2 goals in 8 games here this season. And just for context, the University of Minnesota has only won 2 games so far this season. They've tied 1 and lost 5 here early on in the goings. And he has played massive minutes. He played a 30-minute game against Michigan Tech on the opening weekend, and every single night he's been playing over 16 minutes. So very much a top-line piece already out of the gate as a freshman with the University of Minnesota. And he's tied for 3rd in team scoring, trailing only Luke Mittelstadt, a fellow Habs prospect, Beckett Hendrickson of the Boston Bruins, and Brody Zemer and Brody Lamb of the Sabres and Rangers, respectively. But Mooney's a guy that I think will have real runway to be a dynamic threat off the rush and a line driver here this season in college hockey, and might be the highest scorer on the team by a year's end. I think he has the skill to do so and the intelligence and pace of thought to do so, but he's going to have to really refine the decision-making under pressure, attempt less hope plays where he's just slinging pucks to the slot, hoping that something sticks, and be a bit more calculated with his puck touches and waste possession less often. But he's got every single tool in the book to make things work. Yeah, he's tiny, but he's incredibly hardworking. He's physically competent in the middle of the ice, and I think he was a great selection by the Habs. Moving on, we've got a pair of defenders, and we'll kick things off with Everett Baldwin of the Tampa Bay Lightning, a 5th-round selection at 151st overall. He's a fantastic skater. He's also very dynamic in his offensive activations. There's a lot to like with this skill set. He's not the biggest guy at 6 feet tall, 183 pounds as a right shot blue liner. And so far, he's gotten off to a rather pedestrian start with the St. John Sea Dogs with 2 assists through 10 games. But he's got some fantastic tools to really grow his game in the coming seasons. That mobility is really high end. I think that his ability to manage pressure and physicality down low, around the slot, at the net front while defending the rush is underrated and a decent component of his game, despite not being the biggest player on the ice. And it really is, though, the mobility and offensive skill and activation intuition that I think brings him the most upside down the stretch. I think that there is potential for him to be as high as a number 4, number 5 defenseman in the National Hockey League someday with his toolkit, but it's taking him some time to kind of get acclimated to the CHL. And also, to his credit, he only played 7 games against USHL competition last season. The rest of his year was spent against high school prep competition with St. George's School. So definitely still getting used to the pace of play of major junior hockey, but definitely a guy to keep an eye on here down the stretch. And I think a really great swing on tools and upside by the Tampa Bay Lightning. Last but not least here for today's show, we have one of my favorite players from last year's USHL draft class, and he fell all the way to the 6th round and 188th overall to the Winnipeg Jets. That is Edison Engle, a 6'2", 174-pound left shot defenseman who was playing both with the Des Moines Buccaneers and traded them to the Dubuque Fighting Saints last season in the USHL, and this season has gotten off to the hottest of starts with the Brantford Bulldogs in the Ontario Hockey League. He's an Ohio State University commit for next season, but for the time being, he's got 2 goals and 13 points in 11 games to kick off his CHL career. And he's a guy that with strong mobility, really good intuition and intelligence in the breakout, and overall a lot to like in terms of the offensive distribution and just high-end skating in transition, both going offensively and defensively. There's so much to like with his toolkit. And he's a player that I'm elated to see has acclimated quickly to the CHL game with Brantford. And he's just been so steady for them so far this season, playing big minutes and logging a point almost every single night. This guy has been the definition of consistency with the Bulldogs here so far. And I think that his combination of mobility, intelligence, adaptability, and transition skill to also kill plays defensively and spark quick chances off the rush is a massive area of strength and makes him a modern blue liner fit for the NHL today. But he's going to have to keep building up the physicality to really make his current style work in the National Hockey League and add more dimensions to really be hard to play against at the next level. But that wraps up the show here for us today. Please do let me know in the comments down below who you would have in your top 10 of breakout candidates or home run contenders, potential swings from the 2025 draft class that could hit big down the stretch. I'd love to hear from your thoughts as well as always, but these are my 10 guys. And of course, certainly skewed a little bit towards the USHL, USA-based players that I watched more last season. Definitely still the guys that I'm most familiar with, but I definitely think that there's going to be quite a few gems from that group of talent, and certainly among the top-end players in this class, like Václav Nestrašil and Ryker Lee and Alex Zharovsky. There's a lot to love from this draft class already. Of course, Matthew Schaefer being dominant as he has been in the National Hockey League to start his young career. This has not been the weak draft class necessarily that was advertised for a very long time. Not always by us here on the channel. I think we offer a relatively nuanced perspective that this was a solid, if in certain areas, unspectacular draft class, but closer to average than weak in terms of a class as a whole. And I think that the early returns are certainly supporting that assessment with a potential franchise piece in Matthew Schaefer. But that is it. That is all here for us today. Thank you so much for watching and listening. As always, if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please do make sure to make us your first listen of the day. And if you're your second listen, you're going to head on over to Locked On Fantasy Hockey, where Flip and Steel break down everything you need to know to build yourself a competitive and sustainable fantasy roster. I'm your host, Sebastian High. Thank you so much for tuning in here, and I'll catch you listening again very, very soon.